Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of Fridays with Phillip on the Auburn Undercover podcast, except we're shifting things around a little bit this week. This is the first edition of Thursdays with Phillip, moving around our podcast scheduling. And I think I'm a victim a little bit of my own genius, a little bit coming up with the Fridays with Phillip name. And so this episode with the great Phillip Marshall for the foreseeable future will be in y'all's feeds on Thursday mornings, because for Friday we are trying to get a live show working. Hopefully we can have that for you guys this week. Had a little bit of audio issues last week, so hopefully we can figure those out. Phillip, we are sitting here, and as people listen to this, it'll be Thursday. We are recording this here on Wednesday. We have talked a whole lot about Auburn's quarterbacks the last few days, and I for one cannot really believe it's still Wednesday. We still have to wait a few more days for this next game. Man. I mean, the conversation, it's dominated it this week, of course, since Auburn's loss to Cal. I guess just your general thoughts on, we've beaten it to death talking about Saturday's game against Cal, but your thoughts on that game and the quarterback conversation since then.
Well, as usual, and that's the life of a quarterback, you're blamed for everything. And to be clear, he did not play well. Peyton did not play well, and that surprised me. But there were other issues as well. And having said all that, I think normally the guy that won the job has a bad game, would not put his job immediately in jeopardy. However, Hugh on Monday made it very clear that his job is his starting job is at the least in jeopardy, and so I don't know. We were just talking. I don't know who's going to start Saturday. If I had to bet my house on it, I would bet on Peyton starting that Saturday. But I don't know that that's what's going to be the case. And even if he does, then what's it going to be like? Are they going to get Hank in there for some snaps before mop up time? Because the one thing, we don't see him practice and all that stuff, but one thing that Hank has not had the opportunity to do is play in a situation where they're coming after him. When he played against Maryland, they had completely backed off the pressure. They had the game in hand, and then obviously against Alabama A&M, they weren't good enough to put any pressure on him. So, to me, that would be the next test. Can he deal with pressure? And frankly, Peyton sometimes seems to deal with it pretty well, and sometimes he doesn't seem to deal with it well at all. So, can Hank make all the checks, make the right protection checks, and all those things? Based on what Hugh has said, he's at least a lot closer to he has said he's a lot closer to being able to do that. And so we'll see. I'd be very surprised if Peyton, assuming he starts, doesn't have a good game Saturday. New Mexico's not very good on defense. And so then where does that leave? And at what point do you give Hank some opportunities, and then how do you decide who's going to start the next week against Arkansas? And it's very interesting. And it was obviously some of the things, and I don't think it's just the interceptions. I think it's how some of them occurred and some other things where he just didn't do a good job of what we heard going back to the spring from Ken Austin, from Derek Nix, from Hugh Freeze, that was his strength. getting the ball where it was supposed to be and understanding what he was seeing. And from afar, that didn't look like a straight Saturday, and obviously it didn't look like a straight Hugh Freeze either. So I will admit to being a little bit surprised at Hugh's honesty, and basically saying he can't play like that anymore. And but that's, after this week they got 9 games left and 8 of them are SEC games. And there's not a pushover in the bunch, not even Vanderbilt. So they've got to figure out what they're going to do going forward, and we'll see what that is. I get some of our message board friends don't like me sometimes, because the one thing I know with absolute certainty is that they will do what they believe gives them the best chance to win and be successful. That's what they'll do. That doesn't mean they'll be right, but that's what they'll do. And so it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, I've seen a lot of quarterbacks have really bad games and come back from it. And you mentioned before the show, I mean, Bo Nix against Georgia State got pulled out of the game, and TJ Finley led a 98-yard touchdown drive to probably save Brian Harson's job, and lots of embarrassment and everything else. But then the very next week at LSU, Auburn wins there for the first time in 20 years, and Bo Nix makes one of the most spectacular plays I still have ever seen. So one bad game does not mean that you are a lost cause. And, some people point out, say, yeah, well, it's not just one game. Look back at last year. And I understand that, but that's not the way these coaches are going to look at it. They're not going to look at it based on, well, he didn't play very well in this game or that game last year. This is this year. He won the job, apparently, not say easily, but clearly. And are they going to take it away from him after one bad game? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, and in that vein, talking about that LSU game, I remember it felt a lot like this week, where it was clear TJ Finley was going to play. Yeah. But I think we also kind of felt the same way, where you're like, are they going to start him? It felt obviously like they were going to start Bo. I wonder if it'll be a similar kind of game plan against New Mexico, where I think Peyton Thorne will probably be the first one out there, but you could see a couple drives. Yeah. And then you could say, all right, now we're going to try the Hank Brown thing. Obviously still with the starters. But it will not take until I'd be shocked if it takes until mop-up duty.
Me too. I don't think, and again, I may say this, and Peyton Thorne may play every snap, but I think they're going to give him some chances before the game is over. And in other words, not just come in and play a series or two, and then somebody else comes in, and you just, as like against Alabama A&M. It's this becomes. I mean, I said the same thing last week. This becomes a pretty important game for Auburn in a lot of ways. One, they need to make sure they win. I mean, they're a 4-touchdown favorite. They need to make sure they win, but just, well, that's always the most important. But beyond that, they need to go toward next week with a better idea of, okay, what are we going to do? And if I had to guess, and this is just a guess based on no inside information or anything, I would say that Peyton will start, that Hank will play, and might play more than Peyton if the circumstances allow it. And then probably Peyton will start against Arkansas, but they'll have assuming that Hank plays well against New Mexico. I think that I think that, assuming that both of them play well, I think that Peyton would probably start against Arkansas, but that'd probably be a very quick hook if he was struggling.
Yeah, the
That's kind of
words.
what I look for, and maybe that'll be the case, maybe not. I don't know, but there are other things too. When you're talking about quarterbacks, the fans might not like Peyton Thorne right now, but his teammates do, and especially the older guys. I mean, they elected him a team captain for the second straight year, and the ones we talked to on Tuesday were very supportive of him. So, you don't want to divide your team, and I don't think that either one of them would be part of dividing anything. I mean, I think that there. In fact, I wrote a pretty in-depth story on Hank a couple of weeks ago, and one thing he said and Peyton said was they are very good friends. They play golf together. They're very good friends. So if I know Peyton, I think if he, as bad as it would hurt him, if they said you're not starting, I still think he would do everything he could to help Hank and and try to be ready if needed. Uh, and I think the same thing's true of Hank. So, but I think, and I'm not trying to be I don't. I have long had a policy against. I'm not going to question play calls because they had a reason. They had a reason to call whatever they call. But it seems like it would be beneficial if they would just run the ball more. I said after Saturday's game, I said if they'd run it 60 times and thrown it 10 times, they would have won. And I believe that. But that's not Hugh's offense. But another thing to remember, and I'm rambling here, is that this is also not the same offense as Peyton ran last year. And if I'm not saying that's an excuse, but I'm saying it's not the same. You start comparing this year and last year; it's really very different. And they, not just him, they didn't do a good job of executing the offense Saturday. And
Yeah,
they better get better. They better get better, or be a hard time. But players will be ready to play. The notion that they weren't prepared or that they weren't motivated last Saturday, that just isn't true. Being prepared and being motivated doesn't mean you play well on Saturday. And if you don't play well on Saturday, it doesn't mean you weren't prepared or motivated. So, but under the circumstances, that might be a concern for this game in most situations. But I don't believe it'll be a concern this week. I think the players, again, that we talked to were pretty stung by what happened Saturday. I think they'll be wanting to get that taste out of their mouth.
yeah. I mean, just to touch on what you talked about for a minute. I mean, going back to Michigan State, I don't know how many players in college football history have been 4-time team captains.
That's amazing. It tells you a lot about what kind of person he is.
Yeah, I just thought that was worth noting for a minute. Peyton Thorne's gotten a lot of, honestly, the past 4 days have kind of given me, all the way from watching him run for his life and things just kind of crumble right before our eyes, all the way from that to the heavy criticisms through essentially, as we've learned, every channel imaginable, including money apps. Peyton Thorne has been under it this week. I mean, it has been really brutal. Now, he's somebody who said he deleted Twitter in the off season, and I think he did a great job doing that, especially before a game like this. But
he hears about it. He hears about it. There's no way he doesn't hear about it.
Oh,
and fans can be really inexcusably brutal. Even before the advent of social media, at least to the level it is now. Former Auburn quarterback Daniel Cobb had a bad game. He had several bad games, ended up losing his job, but somehow they got hold of his phone number and just one after another, after another, after another, after another. And why you want to do that, I have no clue. Of course, I have no clue why you want to go on Twitter and trash a guy that's trying as hard as he can and who's a lot more hurt by what happened than any fan is. But that's the world we live in now.
Yeah, I thought Damari Alston. I think you were the one who brought it up to him.
Yeah,
couple days ago. You could sort of see, like, Damari is a very soft spoken guy. He's going to deliver his answers pretty short, pretty succinct. You could tell he sort of perked up. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but he was bothered by that idea when you brought it up. You could tell it was something he had been. It had kind of been eaten at him the past couple days, and I'm sure there's a lot of people. Look, it's not excusing how Peyton Thorne played in that game,
no,
but it
no.
is something that at the end of the day, it's 20-something-year-old.
One thing that Damari Alston said, Hank Brown told me, he said, Peyton's one of my best friends. Damari Alston said, Peyton's one of my best friends. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. And again, that doesn't mean, hey, he's a good guy. He gets to be the starting quarterback. I'm not saying that, but he's the kind of guy I think that will come back hard and just try to make sure he doesn't make those mistakes again.
What have you made, Phillip, of not necessarily? I mean, we'll figure out how Hugh is handling the quarterbacks in the most concrete way possible on Saturday. But what have you made of? You talk about how transparent he was on Monday. Tiger Talk was brutal. Just to put it bluntly, Tiger Talk was brutal. In the sense of kind of just going A to Z on everything Peyton Thorne did wrong in that game. What have you kind of made of? I feel like it's been Hughes had to talk about it thousands of words this week so far. We're only recording here on Wednesday. What have you kind of made of this?
I'm a little surprised by it, to be honest with you. I think that, as I've said before, Hughes is bluntly honest, and but I've been a little surprised by it. I wasn't surprised that he said we can't play that way. It's not acceptable. I wasn't surprised by that, but later in the same press conference, he was asked something else about, like, what do you think caused the problems? And he said lack of execution at the quarterback position, and so that's got to be tough for Peyton Thorne to hear that. But and it's not, I'm not into this, but I hear and read all the time. Well, they get paid now, so that means they're open season. I still don't know what good it does to trash a college football player. I don't know why. The whole thing of, I understand Auburn people everywhere were disappointed Saturday, but the whole idea of being angry and vengeful, that escapes me. I don't get that. Never have. They don't care. Nobody cares about what I think.
Well, and to make to show the other side of that, and I see where those people are coming from, and there are parts of that I definitely agree with. Obviously, I'm not saying you should go bash a kid, but there are levels to everything. Daniel Jones the Giants quarterback was met like walking to his car after that game, and just was being badmouthed by, like, there's always a line.
And gambling has added to it as well.
It has.
There's no doubt about that too. But I think that you don't want to get carried away with this coming up Saturday, particularly on offense. I think Auburn's defense is going to have a challenge. I think they're pretty good on offense, but they haven't been any good at all on defense. So, you can't, if Peyton goes out there and throws 4 touchdown passes in the first half again, like he did against Alabama A&M, you really can't say, okay, he figured it out, he solved the problems. I mean, we're really not going to know until next week.
Phillip, I was looking it up a few minutes ago while we were talking. You just mentioned New Mexico's defense. It's only been two. They've only played 2 games, even though they played in week 0 because they're coming off a bye week right now.
Right.
Take any statistics for what you want. They are dead last in the country in yards per play allowed, and my jaw dropped physically a few minutes ago. 8.7, basically 8.8 yards per play allowed. The last place team in college football last year, very last place defense, allowed 6.8 yards per play.
And one of those games was against Montana State.
They are very, very bad on defense. But that brings us to a point, Phillip. Like, this game is so interesting to me because there's two sides of the coin. Like you just said, it's gonna be interesting to me, how much can you learn? Now, obviously, the coaches can learn more than we can because they'll know the decisions, all that kind of stuff. But like, both the quarterbacks are probably going to be fine in this. Now, if Peyton goes out there and he's just bad, or Hank's just bad, sure. But like, they're going to be fine in this game.
Yeah, you would think. And this is another one of those games where they could probably say, we're not throwing the ball today. We're just going to hand it off to running backs on every play, and we're going to win 31-0 or something. But I don't think they'll do that. But I do think that they might look at not making every run play an RPO. And I know they don't make every single one an RPO, but most of them are RPOs. And just have more times where you're just calling a gap scheme or whatever and handing the ball to Jarquez Hunter or Damari or whoever and running the football against a team that's not as good as you. Like I said, I think that has been the one surprise. I think it didn't surprise me against Alabama A&M. They could do whatever they wanted to do against Alabama A&M, and would probably have, if they hadn't had those 2 fumbles, would have probably scored 80-something points. But I was surprised they didn't run. I mean, Jarquez has 16 carries in 2 games and averaged 7 yards a carry. Seems to me he needs to get it more. And I got to think they also recognize that. So, but you leave it all with quarterbacks like to throw. And if it's an RPO, if they can, they're probably going to throw it.
Yeah, it was interesting talking to them yesterday, Phillip, I guess Tuesday. They thought they would run the ball more against Cal. Turnovers mess up everything.
Yeah, when you turn it over 5 times, you can't win turning it over 5 times. You just can't. Not unless Auburn could have turned it over 5 times and still beaten Alabama A&M, though it would not have been near as many points. But you turn it over 5 times against a competitive team, which Cal is, you're not going to win. You're just not. I think one play bothered Hugh the most was the deep pass for Cam that got intercepted when the primary receiver was Robert Lewis going across the middle of the field, and I saw this at the time, and he wasn't even covered. I mean, there was nobody close to him, and he still tried to throw a jump ball to Cam, who was hurt, but he didn't know he was hurt, and that's another question. Why didn't he? I mean, there is they got communication. Really, probably when you look back, the best thing to have done was when Cam realized he was hurt, would have been to get on the ground and stay there.
Yeah, that was a freshman mistake, I think, definitely.
Yeah. But I mean, that's it happened the way it happened, and one thing that and you mentioned this, that Peyton Gidget is a running threat, and I don't know how much of any, if any, that Hank is a running threat. So they got a tough decision to make, and it's going to be just extremely interesting to see how they make it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the first things that Freeze was talking about on Monday. He was like, you got to consider it. Thorne's mobility. But at the same time, there's just factors for both of them, and this game is going to be a lot more interesting than I thought Auburn, New Mexico was going to be before the season.
And not because of how lopsided it might be. It's just going to be more interesting because of all this. And we'll see. That's all I know to say is we'll see.
Yep. And you never know. I mean, Devin Dampier is quite a dynamic quarterback, and Bronco Mendenhall, I don't know, he was out of coaching apparently. That is a steal.
Yeah,
that is a steal for New Mexico to get. I mean, he's a great coach.
Yeah, he's a really good coach.
He will have them. I don't know what relative to their program history is. I don't really know, but he probably will have them in a good spot at some point.
Well, their program history is better than New Mexico State's. I mean, they've been to numerous bowl games. And they do not have a down and out program now. They may have a down and out team, but they couldn't. Well, they scored 39 points against Arizona and gave up 60 whatever. I don't see them scoring like that against Auburn, but I'll be surprised if they don't score some.
Yeah, I think you and I might have talked about it at some point this week. Like, if they're a little bit more of a running, if Dampier is more of a scrambler, if they can't throw the ball super well, because I think that's one of Auburn's weaknesses or things they're working on right now.
If they can't throw the ball successfully, then they won't get much done.
Yeah, I agree. Phillip, the other thing we want to talk about tonight, is sort of zooming out the binoculars a little bit from the quarterbacks. This has been a brutal stretch of non-FCS games. Phillip, going back to last year, it came crashing down after, and you never know what's going to happen moving forward, but it came crashing down after Arkansas, and I was convinced this team was on its way to 7 or 8 wins after that game. We don't have to rehash New Mexico State. Alabama was what it was, but Maryland to this, I mean, it's not been a good run here, Phillip, and it's when Arkansas comes down, they got to turn it around.
As bad as Saturday was, I thought that New Mexico State and Maryland were worse because Cal is a good enough team that if you don't play well, they can beat you.
Yes,
I didn't think that New Mexico State shouldn't have been. I know that guy's a really good quarterback. It shouldn't have mattered. Maryland didn't even have their quarterback, but it's different. And like I said, the whole coaching situation last year and who was doing what was kind of screwed up. But here's the thing that I think Hugh has got to figure out. I mean, they lose to Georgia by 7 and they're driving at the end of the game. They clearly should have beaten Alabama. All they had to do was knock down a pass, and they're going to beat Alabama. Yet they lose in the last 5 games. They've lost to New Mexico State, lost to Maryland, and now to Cal. And he's getting criticized for it. And honestly, it's understandable. In this league, if you're going to play in the SEC, and obviously we're not talking about SEC games here, but if you're going to play in the SEC, you need to win the games you're supposed to win. Because you're going to play some games where you can play really well and still lose. And why they could play so well against Georgia, so well against Alabama. I thought the game against Alabama was the best game they played all season. I really did. I mean, they dominated most of the game against a team with far superior firepower.
Yep, at the line of scrimmage too.
Yeah, they dominated the line of scrimmage, and Milroe struggled until that one pass. And but then New Mexico State. I said Cal might have been. Maryland might have been. New Mexico State was the worst because they not only got beat, they got beat handedly by a team that never should have been able to do that. So I think Hugh's got to figure that out. And because he just can't keep doing that. I say he can't, Auburn can't. They can't keep losing those kinds of games. They just can't. And
Yep.
and he did make a good point Monday. He said, right now we're not good enough to play bad and still win. And and this is nothing. Somebody said Pat Dye never lost games he should win. Well, he absolutely did. And his very first year, they lost 3 games. They had won and lost them on an illegal snap, one of them, on a fumbled return of a kickoff, and against Wake Forest, and then another fumble on the goal line against Tennessee with just seconds left to win the game. So, and I saw them lose. I saw them have to kick a last-second field goal to beat Southwest Louisiana. I saw them have to kick a last-second field goal to beat Louisiana Tech, and that was Louisiana Tech's first year in what was in Division 1A. It's not like one of Louisiana Tech's better teams. And so it happens. But the difference is, even in those games I'm talking about, Auburn figured out a way to win. Even Jacksonville State, you can't play much worse than that in 2015. But in the end, they found a way to win. And if they had found a way that Saturday, which would have meant not turning the ball over 5 times, and they had won, then you'd still hear grousing, but it wouldn't be the same. But obviously, you just can't turn the ball over like that. If you do, you lose.
Yeah, it's I hesitate to say it's a trend, but there's been games like the ones we've been describing. I think that was a valid. I'll just say I think that was a valid criticism of the Hugh Freeze hire. And I'm not saying I think there will be valid criticisms for any coach you hire, but I think pointing to losses to Vanderbilt, they went on the road to Arkansas when they were at Ole Miss as the number 8 team in the country. They lost 30-0 in that game. They lost to Memphis. He had the day Auburn would pretty much hired him. They figured out they were the Iron Bowl 2022. They got curb stomped by New Mexico State while he was at Liberty. So I'm not saying that is a detrimental flaw, but it is a valid criticism.
What's happened is what's happened. And he said at some point,
media days. Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
He said that's something he had to get better at. So that's his own words. And he does need to get better at it, for sure. Because you can't just do that indefinitely. And you can't and you got to win the game you're supposed to win. I'll say it again. You got to win the game you're supposed to win. Or at least almost all the games you're supposed to win. And because you look down the road, I guess they'll be, assuming they win Saturday, I guess they'll be favored against Arkansas. But that's certainly no gimme. Oklahoma's certainly no gimme. Then Georgia. I mean, no matter how well you play, you got some really challenging days ahead. And that's why it hurts when you lose a game like that, because that was one you expected to get and should have got.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to bring up, Phillip, is I think people pointed to Arkansas, they pointed to Cal, they pointed to Arkansas, they point in the preseason, and they pointed to Vanderbilt. They were like, okay, those are Power 4 games at home. Seems pretty likely you'll get those. Now, I'm not saying Auburn's going to lose.
I think they'll be favored against Arkansas. They'll be favored against Vanderbilt.
I think they'll win all those. I think they'll win those games. Yeah,
I do too, but not if they do the things they did Saturday though.
Yeah,
and I mean, Georgia's going to be very hard to win. Alabama on the road. Alabama on the road is going to be very hard to win. Outside of those two, I watched most of Oklahoma's game Saturday. There wasn't much to like about that game from Oklahoma's perspective, but they won. But they won the game. Of course, the worst performance Saturday wasn't Auburn's. Notre Dame figured out how to lose
Yes.
to Northern Illinois, and it was kind of interesting because they basically lost because they wanted to win by more than 14-13 because they had the ball on 2nd and 1 at midfield and decided they're going to throw a long pass, and their hot shot transfer quarterback, who also had a terrible game, throws a pick and it gets run back to the 50-yard line, and Northern Illinois goes down there and kicks the game-winning field goal. I mean, if they would have just handed it off and made the first down, that'd have probably been one more first down away from ending the game. But that's another coach. I mean, he's lost Mount Marcus Freeman. He's lost to Marshall. He lost to one of the worst Stanford teams ever, and now he's lost to Northern Illinois. The week after everybody crowned them as in the playoffs, there wasn't even any question about it. Nobody else they played could beat them. Well, if you play bad enough, you can lose. But Auburn needs to come out of this coming up Saturday with a better idea about the quarterbacks and just feeling better about themselves, and that they put that behind them and now they can move on. That's what I think, anyway.
Well, like you said, Phil, I mean, there will be grumbling. There would have been grumbling if Auburn had won this game with the way it did, but it wouldn't have been. It just goes to show how, and this is a very simple statement, but just even with that kind of performance, a couple plays, not even a couple plays, a couple decisions can completely
a couple of decisions and a absolute 100% certain pick six hit somebody in the stomach and he drops it.
Yep.
But as I said, he'll always remember that. And nobody's hurt as bad as he was by that. Because if he had done that, it would have been 14-14, and I think Auburn would have won the game. But I think the decision making, some of which led to the interceptions, is the biggest issue that Hugh has with how Peyton played. Yeah. And they did not in any way expect that to happen. They thought that was his strength.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were playing really bad on offense before they turned it over a bunch of times.
They were going 3 times in the fourth quarter, didn't they? I think.
They had, with 7 seconds to go in the third quarter, because I think they turned over on the last play of the third quarter. They had 1 turnover before that.
Yeah.
And no one would say they were good on offense before that. So
no, except for one drive.
Yeah.
Except for one drive. But then you also, not only did they turn it over, it's where they turned it over. I mean, Cal didn't do anything much on offense, really, after the first drive, except they gave him a 21-yard drive and a 36-yard drive. And except for that run on the 36-yard drive, I mean, really starting about the last 3 series of the second quarter.
Yep.
Cal wasn't getting much of anything done. And but Auburn looked terrific on the first drive. And then Cal answered right back, and there we went. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't even aware that their second turnover was right at the end of the third quarter, and then they had 3 in the fourth quarter.
I believe so. Yeah, I mean, we haven't even talked about the defense very much, but I think I've come to realize over the years, like, what happens early, let's get to the end of the game. I mean, I remember Kevin Steele's teams used to do that all the time. Yeah. And they just adjust really well. And credit to Durkin and that crew.
Oh yeah, I thought that was a terrific job, and should have been a good enough job to win the game. But the offense, like you said, it's not like they played well before they started turning the ball over. They were already struggling. And now part of that, to be fair, was getting back-to-back punts down the 2-yard line and the 1-yard line. The Cal punter had a lot to do with them winning that game.
He did.
And but I think eventually, if I'm not mistaken, they got it out of there both times, pretty close to midfield, and turned it over both times, didn't they?
Yeah, I hate to beat this point, but I think they got it out of there running the ball.
They did,
and then they threw an interception.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to me, run the ball till they stop it.
And Jarquez Hunter's pretty good.
Yeah, and he's had 16 carries in 2 games. And then did he play after the fumble?
I can't remember. I mean, they definitely threw it around a lot after that to try to go down quickly.
Yeah, after his fumble, it was 21-7. So they were probably just thinking throw the ball at that point.
Yep. But I mean, it's crazy. Little decisions. You know, Keontae Scott talked about it yesterday that he didn't think he did a good job as a return man. I mean, he decides to let one go, and it lands on the 2. You know, Thorne decides to, what if he sees Robert Lewis and he runs to the 20-yard line? Auburn scores, and it's 21-21 with 2 minutes left, and Auburn's defense is playing lights out and the place is on fire. You know, those are 2 decisions by people who are, you know, 22, 23 years old.
You know, a lot of coaches over the years have told me that most games come down to just 4 or 5 plays, and who makes those plays. And I give Cal all the credit. They came here and played their rear ends off. They did, and their defense is pretty good, I think. But but then on the other hand, was it their defense or Auburn's offense? And I think that, you know, he has said several times, including right after the game, that Auburn had receivers running open all day long and just didn't get it to them. And that's the other question I have about Peyton, is dealing with pass rush. I think that of course, no quarterback is as good when he's getting pressured a lot as he is when he's not. I mean, that's just a fact of life. But you got to either get it to whoever your outlet guy is, or if you can't do that, just throw it in the stands. Don't throw an interception. And because he's gonna whoever the quarterback is, I promise you, next week, Travis Williams, that's what his defense is all about, is getting after the quarterback, and he'll be rather excited about that game, I would imagine.
Might be licking his chops a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah. But I do think that they don't just need to win Saturday, though. That's the number one goal. But they need to feel better. They need to play better, and they should. But the fact of the matter is that executing against New Mexico's defense and executing against pretty much any SEC defense, that's very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, at least on paper, New Mexico is. I don't know if they're going to be as, you know, personnel deficient as somebody like Alabama A&M, but
no, it'll be better than that.
Not very good. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
We will. Another week, another game.
But thank you, Phillip.
I was going to say, I do think that I do hope that whatever happens with the quarterbacks, that I wish people would understand the hurt they can cause when it gets brutal. Not when it gets you get criticized, not that, but when it gets nasty and ugly, and not just for the quarterback, but for his family too. I mean, people can think it's not true all they want to, but that was part of why Bo Nix ended up at Oregon, because his mother in particular was truly hurt by the attacks on her son, who turns out was a pretty good player.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not too bad. All righty. Well, we will probably sign off there. Phillip, I really enjoyed it this week. Enjoyed this episode. Thought it was a good time. Our first edition of Thursdays with Phillip, everybody. So moving forward, again, expect these in your feeds on Thursday morning, and we will hopefully have the live show. If the audio works out, hopefully the live show will be in y'all's feeds on Friday morning, and then we'll be on to New Mexico. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and we will talk to y'all soon.